Today I want to show you my latest little soldering aid, a gadget that I call a gravity clamp. I'm building a prototype of a 28 pad touch remote control. This is one of the boards that make it up, and I've already placed the multi-pin components, which are far more difficult to solder than 2-pin devices. I've done those using the hot plate technique, which I showed in an earlier video. So now I'm just wanting to solder on all of the passive parts, the capacitors, resistors and such, which are 2-pin devices. Here are a couple of capacitors which you may be able to see. These are medium-sized surface mount devices. They're a 0805 size, which comes from the old imperial measurements, being 80 by 50 thousandths of an inch in area. In metric, I think that's about 2 by 1.3 millimeters or thereabouts. So the difficulty with these little components is how to hold them in place on the pads while you're soldering, because as soon as you touch the soldering iron to the device, it's so small and light that it'll move around and won't necessarily align to the pad. And also, as you remove the soldering iron from it, the surface tension of the solder will pull the device, the component, away from the board. So it's almost impossible to solder these things without holding them in place in some way. Impossible to do with your finger because they're just so small. So I've come up with my gravity clamp, which consists of a wooden ruler with a toothpick glued in. The end of the toothpick has been sanded to be slightly flat. A plastic domestic cleaner bottle cap glued onto the ruler. A weight which goes in the cap, and a scrap of aluminium which I have cut a slot in. The height of the slot is carefully calculated so that when I insert the ruler into it, it sits at about an angle of 15 or 20 degrees to the vertical, so it holds the ruler steady in place. So how I use that is to roughly place the component on the circuit board pads, and then place the gravity clamp onto that component to hold it in place. Now it's not precisely positioned, so I can adjust that with the tweezers while it's being held in place, and I'll do that in a moment. First I will zoom the camera in so that you get a better look of at what I'm doing. Okay, now you should have a better view, so I can just readjust the position of that capacitor onto the pads properly. That should be close enough. Then it's just a matter of soldering each end using a fine tip soldering iron. And voila, one soldered capacitor.